السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We are discussing the various factors and reasons that people would fabricate, what caused them to make up lies against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what motivated them to concoct something and attribute it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the seventh reason was that they wanted to get closeness to the rulers, or they had some worldly motive. So now on page 126 in the second paragraph, the third line, قال الحافظ السيوطي في تدريب الراوي أسند الحاكم عن أبي عبيد الله وزير المهدي قال المهدي ألا ترى ما يقول لي مقاتل أي ابن سليمان الخراساني البلخي صاحب التفسير. So Mahdi, who was one of the rulers, and he's a very righteous rulers, it's mentioned with regards to him that one day he mentioned that, don't you see what this person Muqatil ibn Sulaiman al-Khurasani is mentioning about me? So Muqatil is the one who wrote the tafsir. Now, there's a lot of kalam on him, whether he was on a part of the al-Sunna, whether he was astray, etc. There's not a place to go into detail what the various scholars had to say about him. So this person told him that, if you want, I'll just simply fabricate a hadith for you to support you. So then you have support from a hadith for you, and here you have this person who is known amongst people as a mufassir. He is uttering some statements. Of course, people will follow what's mentioned in the hadith. So Mahdi said, La hajata li fiha. There's no need for me. There's no need for that. You do not need to fabricate a hadith for me. But can you see, on the spur of the moment, just to support the ruler, he was willing to fabricate a hadith. وَمِمَّنْ عُرِفَ بِوَضْعِ الْحَدِيثِ تَمَلُّقًا لِلْمُلُوكِ. So a person who was known to concoct and to make up narrations just to get the love of the kings is Ghiyath ibn Ibrahim ibn Tarikh ibn Muawiyah al-Nakha'i. وكان يرتاد حضرة الخليفة المهدي. He used to frequent the gatherings of Khalifa al-Mahdi. فكان يبادر إلى تأييد ما يرى منه من لهو أو فعل غير لائق. And he would hasten to make up something which could support and give a strength to the views, or to what Mahdi was doing, whether it was in entertainment or whether he was doing any thing which is not appropriate. ذكر في غير كتاب من كتب الرجال والمصطلح والموضوعات. It's mentioned in more than one book, in so many different books, of the books on narrators and the books on nomenclature and the books on fabrications. أن غياث بن إبراهيم النخعي أدخل على الخليفة المهدي al-Abbasi. That one day he was brought there in the gathering of Mahdi. وكان المهدي يحب الحمام ويشتهيها. Mahdi, he loved pigeons and he would crave for pigeons. وكان أمامه حمام يلعب بها. So in front of him there was a pigeon and he was playing with that pigeon. It was like he kept it as a pet and he would like to play with it. فقيل لغياث حدث أمير المؤمنين. So someone told him that, mention some ahadith to the Amir al-Mu'minin. فحدث بحديث أبي هريرة. So he saw that the Amir al-Mu'minin is playing with a pigeon. So he wanted to now gain the pleasure of the Khalifa. So therefore he said, he quoted this narration of Abu Hurairah, لا سبق إلا في خف أو نسل أو حافظ. So this is how the narration come. It's mentioned like this here in Musnad Ahmad and in Sunan Abi Dawud. But now what he done, just to get the pleasure of the ruler, he added the words "aw janahin." So the meaning is that there is no valid racing except in camel racing. So you make the camels run, or naslin, or in archery you have competition there, or hafir, or in horses, with horses you have competition. So he added on, or pigeons. So you can use pigeons and you can have a competition. فأمر له المهدي بعشرة آلاف درهم. Mahdi immediately commanded that he must be given 10,000 dirhams. So imagine so much wealth just because he mentioned this one fabrication. Then when he stood up to go, Mahdi whispered and he said, Ashhadu anna qafaka dhabin ala Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He knew that this person was lying, that he fabricated, and he added on from his own side this additional word, aw janahin. So he said that I bear testimony that you are lying. So qafa, you know, it means the back of the neck, the nape. So that is basically saying that I know well that you are a fabricator against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But wa inna mastajlabtu dhalika ana, because I attracted it, because I caused you to lie. So therefore he then issued this commandment that he must be given 10,000 dirhams. And then he didn't take any benefit from that pigeon. Why? Because it was a means of fabrication against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَأَمَرَ بِذَبْحِ الْحَمَامِ. So then he ordered and commanded that the pigeon must be slaughtered, فَضُبِحَتْ, and it was then slaughtered, and then they did not partake of it, or they did not get any benefit from it, they did not eat from it. So if you look here in the footnotes in Shaykh Abd Abu Ghuddah, the summary is that he's saying that he was a very intelligent person, he was a great scholar as well, he was very pious as well. He even quotes the one incident where one day it became very, very cloudy, and you can see that the person he mentions, Dawood ibn Rashid, he says, فَجُعْنَا أَن تَكُونَ الْقِيَامَةِ. We actually thought that it's the day of Qiyamah. So that is how it became outside. So he says that I went to go look for Mahdi, and I found that he was in sajda on the sand, and he said that, oh Allah, do not make it such that our enemies can use this as use this as something to rejoice over us, and do not use it as a means of embarrassing our Nabi. Thereafter he said, Allahumma in kunta akhadhta al-amma bi dhanbi fahadhihi nasiyati biyadik. Oh Allah, if you are causing this punishment to come down because of my sins, then I am before you, Ya Allah, you punish me alone. So imagine now he's telling this here and he's the ruler. فَمَا أَتَمَّ كَلَامَهُ حَتَّى انْجَلَّتْ. He did not complete his statement. So imagine how pious he was. He hardly completed his sentence, and the skies opened up and it became normal again. So you can see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's making dua that if it's because of my sins, then they must, Ya Allah, you punish me. But it wasn't because of his sins, rather because of his piety, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them again. So this is Mahdi. And then also got an incident there that someone brought to him a shoe, and he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, hadi na'lu Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that this here is the sandal of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Qad hadaytuha laka, I give it as a gift to you. So he said, bring it here, and he started to kiss it, he started to honor it so much, and then he commanded that this person must get 10,000 dirhams again. So then when that person went, then he told those who were around him, أَتَرَوْنَ أَنِّي لَمَا أَعْلَمَ أَنَّ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم لَمْ يَرَ النَّعْلَ هَذِهِ فَضْلًا أَنْ يَكُونَ لَبِسَهَا. Don't you, do you think that I'm not so, I don't know that the Prophet ﷺ did not even see this kind of a sandal, leave alone wearing it. But, وَلَوْ كَذَّبْنَاهُ قَالَ لِلنَّاسِ. If we were going to tell this person that it cannot be the sandal of the Prophet ﷺ, what will he do? He will go around telling people, أَتَيْتُ أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ بِنَعْلِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم فَرَدَّهَا عَلَيَّ. That I went with the sandal of the Prophet ﷺ to the Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he refused to take it. وَكَانَ مَن يُصَدِّقُهُ أَكْثَرَ مِمَّن يَرْفَعُ خَبَرَهُ. More people will believe in him compared to those who will not trust him. إذا كان من شأن العامة الميل إلى أشكالها والنصرة للضعيف على القوي وإن كان الضعيف ظالما. He's saying because this is how the mentality of people is, that they will just listen to him because he is one from amongst them, he's regarded as inferior, as weaker compared to a king. So even though he might be weaker, people will believe in him. So فَاشْتَرَيْنَا لِسَانَهُ وَقَبِلْنَا هَدِيَّتَهُ. So we bought his tongue. That means that now he won't speak against us, and he won't pass this kind of allegations against us. So nevertheless, he was a very wise person. He was a great scholar. But you can see when these kind of things happen, he had his own way of dealing with these kind of instances. وسيأتي تعليقا, so on page 128, وسيأتي تعليقا حديث صحيح. He says that on page 229 you will read the footnote, so we'll read the footnote when we reach there. There's an authentic narration, but for that, so the hadith itself is authentic and there is a valid chain for that narration, but وضع له أبو بكر محمد بن أحمد بن هارون الشافعي إسنادا باطلا من طريق الحجاج الثقفي للتقرب إلى أبي محمد المزكي الثقفي لأنه من ولد الحجاج. So what this person done is he took and he fabricated a chain. In the chain, Hajjaj al-Thaqafi, you know, this zalim oppressor, this oppressive ruler is in that sanad. So the reason why he fabricated this chain is just because he wanted to get the pleasure. He wanted to win over his son, Abu Muhammad al-Muzakki. Why? Because he was a son of Hajjaj. So he thought that if I quote this narration with his father in the chain, then in that way I will be able to impress him. I will be able to make him happy. And then he might give me a gift. Or at least at most I'll get close to him. وأمثال هذا وذاك من الوضاعين المتملقين كثير. He's saying examples like these. So hada means like this here, or wadhaka, or like that. So where they are fabricating a narration to begin with, or maybe they're taking sahih narrations and they just making up a chain so that a prominent person can be in the chain so that they can impress and gain the pleasure of the ruler. He say there are so many abundant examples like this here. فَلَا أُطِيلُ بِذِكْرِ. Do you know the word tamalluk? So the word tamalluk means when you want to get closeness, when you got love for someone. Malaqa means to have love. Mutamalliq, so that means they want to win over the king. They want to get the love of the king. So that's the one meaning. But the word tamalluk, it also means, Zainuddin al-Razi, he mentioned, يُعْطِي بِلِسَانِهِ مَا لَيْسَ فِي قَلْبِهِ in Mukhtar al-Sahah. That when a person, he mentions with his tongue what is not in his heart. So sometimes they would go and just praise the kings like this here in a false way, although they didn't have any reverence, any honor, any regard for the king. Why? Because they just wanted to get the pleasure of the ruler. ومما وضعه الواضعون للأغراض الدنيوية. From amongst that which the fabricators have concocted for worldly pursuits, these are the examples. So this here is a fabricated narration. Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam عن التعليم والأذان بالأجرة. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade that a person can teach or give adhan in exchange of a wage, a salary. فمن فعل ذلك فعليه لعنة الله والملائكة والناس أجمعين. If anyone goes to this level and he starts to teach or he starts to give adhan in exchange of a remuneration, then upon him the curses of Allah and the malaika and all humankind will be upon him. So this is a fabrication. ومنها, so that is against the teachers. Now this here, it's in support of the teachers. المعلمون خير الناس. That the teachers, they're the best of all people. كلما خلق الذكر جددوه عظموهم ولا تستأجروهم فتحرجوهم. So can you see that this here is a fabrication? عظموا means that you must give them as a gift from your side. ولا تستأجروهم, but don't formally hire them in exchange of a salary. Why? Because in that case, فتحرجوهم, you will be giving them, you will be putting them through difficulty. You will be giving them too less. For, of course, if there's a salary, then maybe say the salary which they will give a scholar is $500. But if you have to give him a gift, you might give 10,000 dinars in that time. So rather give them as a gift. In that case, you are showing more appreciation for their services. فإن المعلم إذا قال للصبي قل بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فقال الصبي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كتب الله له براءة للصبي وبراءة لوالديه وبراءة للمعلم من النار. So every time the teacher, so remember this is a fabrication. Now don't think that this is a virtue. Every time the teacher teaches the small child to say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and then the small child says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes for that small child and for his parents and for the teacher emancipation and freedom from the fire. Likewise, وَمِنْهَا لَا تَشِيرُ الْحَاكَةِ وَلَا الْمُعَلِّمِينَ. So haka, they mentioned this here under the chapter of hawaka, which means to weave, to knot. So don't لا تستشيروا, don't consult with those people who do knitting and weaving in our context, in those people who do sewing, the tailors, don't consult with them. وَلَا الْمُعَلِّمِينَ. So can you see in one paragraph they putting the status of a teacher to the level of a tailor, like bringing his status so down. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى سَلَبَ عُقُولَهُم, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has snatched away their intelligence. So these people, they don't have any intelligence. وَنَزَعَ الْبَرَكَةَ مِنْ أَكْسَابِهِمْ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken away all blessings from their earnings. So you remember our friend Ghulam Khalil, we spoke about last week. So he is the one who comes in the Sunnah. Likewise, the narrator from him is also unknown. And Abdullah ibn Zakhar, he's also a person who used to fabricate. So they are the narrators here, and that is why it's a fabrication. وَمِنْهَا, likewise, there's another fabrication. مَرَّ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم بِمِرْدَاسٍ الْمُعَلِّمِ. So Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is, it's a fabrication that it's alleged that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed by this person and he said, إِيَّاكَ وَحَطَبَ الصِّبْيَانِ وَخُبْزَ الرَّقَاقِ وَإِيَّاكَ وَالشَّرْطِ عَلَى كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. So yeah, there's the person, his name is Nahshal, and he's a kadhab. So like this here, many fabrications which they put now. So whether it was because to get close to a ruler, or in these cases here, you can see it's just for some worldly benefit, that maybe now they no more have to pay school fees, isn't that? If they put all of these kind of fabrications, now you no more have to pay fees, because you're saying that the muallim cannot charge. So they're getting the worldly benefit. Now they are saving. وهناك أسباب أخرى تولد منها الوضع في الحديث. So until here, he mentioned 7 different reasons why they would fabricate. So fortunately, we don't have imtihan. If you had imtihan, you would have to memorize all 7, but I trust that you still memorize it. But he's saying that it's not confined and restricted to these 7 reasons. There are also other reasons as well, which gave a birth to fabrications in ahadith. So there are numerous other reasons why people would fabricate. مثل قصد بعض الرواة الإغراب في الحديث على زملائه ومرافقيه. That some of the narrators, they just wanted to, you see now these kind of reasons, you can even include them within the 7 if you want to, and you can mention them separately. They wanted to mention something unique. They wanted to be the one and only ones who knew the narration. So they wanted to mention something unique compared to what their peers and what their colleagues were narrating. يَسْمَعُ مِنْهُ, so that if he is the only person in the world who is quoting that narration, then people will have to travel to him, isn't it? From all over the world, if people want that hadith, they will have to come to him. وَيَأْخُذُوا عَنْهُ, and they would have to take it from him. وَقَدْ وَقَعَ هَذَا مِنْ ابْنِ أَبِي حَبِيبَةَ وَحَمَّادَ النَّصِيبِ وَبَهْلُولَ بْنِ عُبَيْدَ وَأَسْرَمَ بْنِ حَوْشَبْ وَغَيْرِهِم. So they would come up with these gharaib. They would come up with these juicy narrations which nobody else has, so that people would think that they are the only ones who have this narration. In our context today, it's coming up with asanid, that, you know, if you are the only person in the world who has a particular sanad. Now, those of you, I don't know if any of you are living in the Arab world or spend some time there, you will know how much regard they have for isnad there. So maybe you'll come up and fabricate and show that you have a very unique sanad. So now the Kuwaitis and the Qataris and them, they'll pay you lots and lots of money, so just so that they can get you to have a maqra, a recital, and in this way, yeah, you'll get so much prominence. They'll invite you, they'll give you so much honor, and in that and the benefit you get is in so there's a lot of worldly benefits which you are getting by showing that you are the only person in the world who has this kind of a sanad. So that concludes this topic on what motivated people to fabricate. Why would people have this audacity, and what would prompt them to concoct something against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Now he's speaking about a different topic, and he's saying ad-dassu fi kutub ar-ruwat, secretly inserting something in the books of the narrators. So he'll mention it later, but so that you can understand from the beginning, I'll explain quickly now that, you know, in the past, how they would have books is that when they wanted a book, then it wasn't such that you just send it to the publishers and you got 1,000 copies printed. So now, for example, this print here, which I have of Dar al-Bashair al-Islamiyah, if I have to take my pen and scratch out a whole line, and if I have to write that Shaykh Abd Abu Ghuddah said something, no one will assume that Shaykh Abd Abu Ghuddah, no one will for a moment even think that Shaykh Abd Abu Ghuddah said that. Why? Because besides my print, everyone has their own unique print, their own individual copy of the kitab. So they won't think, I won't be able to use this as a way of fabricating against the author, or mentioning that the author said this, or falsely attributing something to him. And even if I do it, people will be able to clearly see the difference, that I'm writing it in a pen and this here is typed out. But in the past, everything was handwritten, isn't it? So what they would do is they would secretly interpolate. So interpolate means that secretly you go and you insert, you add things to the book of the person. And they try to forge, you know, in today's times, they forge signatures. So in that time, they would try to forge and copy his handwriting, write exactly like him. Shaykh Abd Abu Ghuddah is going to explain that even if it was an old script, they would then put sand over it. They would put it in the sun just so that their handwriting can also look old and it can blend in. So the color, because, you know, ink, the color of it changes over a period of time. So sometimes when you write, it's black, but afterwards maybe it becomes like a reddish color. So they would go to this extent. So to show that the author has mentioned us, and then people would assume that this here is written by the author, and this is how they would get fabrications circulated. So he says, وَمِن تِلْكَ الْأَسْبَابِ الدَّسُّ فِي كُتُبِ الرُّوَاةِ. So this here, secretly inserting into the books of the narrators. وَالدَّسُّ إِدْخَالُ شَيْءٍ فِي شَيْءٍ بِخِفَاءٍ وَاحْتِيَالٍ. What's the meaning of this? It's adding one thing into another thing, secretly and in a cunning way. وَالْبَاعِثُ عَلَيْهِ. The motivation for this here is riqatu dinin fi das. The person who does it, so das is the person who interpolates. Either he does not have any religious consciousness, he is very weak. He's very weak in his deen. Or su'u tawiyya, he has an evil agenda. Okay, then maybe he's doing it to plot. Or maybe he's doing it out of ignorance. Like, you know, he wants to write his own notes and he's not realizing that, like, he got the book open in front of him. Now, if he's going to write there, people are going to assume that it's from the author. So he does this here unknowingly, واستهتار وheedlessness, أو رغبة الأذى للمدسوس عليه, or he really intends to harm the person whose book he is interpolating. So you can see there can be various motives and reasons why he is doing this here. وهذا الداء الوبيل وقع في بعض المفسدين الضالين في بعض كتب المحدثين. He say that this disastrous ailment, so wabil means like something which can destroy a person, and that, you know, is a sickness. So this disastrous ailment, it has happened by some of those who are corrupt and intent, and they were astray. They done this here in the books of the muhaddithin. Some of them done this, they added their own words. They went to go write in the books of the fuqaha. وَمِنْ غَيْرِ هَؤُلَاءِ وَهَؤُلَاءِ. Not only that, maybe they went into the books of the Mufassirin, maybe the books of the Nahwiyin. So, you know, in Nahwa, maybe the person wants to now, or maybe in grammar, he wants to show something, and then in the example is quoting a hadith. So now the person would go there and he would add on to that. So people will say that this great scholar, yeah, he wrote it in his book, and it's a hadith, and then attributed it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he says that now you had sometimes a senior sheikh. Now, you know, when a person becomes old, then he goes to ardal al-umr, isn't it? Now he gets weakness in his age. His mind also becomes weaker. His eyesight becomes weaker. So he says, فَقَدْ يَتَغَفَّلُ بَعْضُ الْمُفْسِدِينَ بَعْضَ الشُّيُوخِ الْكِبَارِ فِي السِّنِّ الضُّعَفَاءِ فِي الذَّهْنِ أَوْ بِالْبَصَرِ لِقُرْبِهِ أَوْ لِقَرَابَتِهِ مِنْهُ. Qurb means maybe they were just close to him. So a neighbor, a friend. Qaraba means they had family ties with him. ويضع له أحاديث أو مسائل أو غيرها. So now the Shaykh is old and he's weak. So now they take his books and they add on this. They add words in his book. ويدسها في أوراقه وكتب. They interpolate it in his pages and in his books. دون أن يشعر بها. And the Shaykh, he does not know. So then what happens? The Shaykh every day, now he's elder in age, and because he's older in age, he was born earlier, so he managed to meet many senior muhaddithun. So getting a sanad from him will be a shorter sanad compared to getting it from anyone else. So he will have lots and lots of students. So these people, what they would do, they would come secretly at night, maybe because they're close to him, so like a neighbor, they have close contact with him, maybe their family. So at night, the old man is sleeping, they go there and they add on and they put new ahadith in his book. Now the next day, the Shaykh, he needs to go. So maybe he has weakness in his eyesight, or maybe he has weakness in his mind, so he cannot remember. And now he goes and he starts to quote those ahadith, and people will now say that this Shaykh has quoted it. Just like how everything else is sahih, this is also sahih. So this is what they would do. وكان هذا ممكنا في الزمن القديم. Now this is the point which Shaykh Abd Abu Ghuddah is saying, that this was possible in the previous times. يوم كانت الكتب المتداولة كلها مخطوطة, when people had to actually write down with their hands a book which they wanted. تنسخ وتقتنى, it had to be written down, وتقتنى, and this is how it would be acquired. It wouldn't be formally printed. ويرحل بها إلى أقاصي البلاد. If you wanted to go to another place, you have to take your books with you. It's like you don't even have a PDF. Now that book which you have written, you're carrying that copy with you. فيسن الدس فيها. So now it's very, very easy to interpolate, to add on into it. Why? لعدم انتشارها بين طلبة العلم والعلماء. Because it is not circulated amongst students and amongst the scholars. فإذا دس إنسان شيئا في كتاب, so when a person has to add on something in any book, فقل أن يعرف أنه مدسوس. It's very seldom that it will even be realized that this here is an interpolation. This is a distortion. This here is they are adding on into the book. وخاصة إذا كان الكتاب المدسوس فيه كله بخط واحد. Especially if everything is written like in one handwriting. When you open a book and you see everything written the same, it will be very, very difficult, almost impossible to notice that that is a addition in the book. فلا يظن المدسوس إلا أنه من مؤلف الكتاب. So that interpolation will now be assumed to be from the author of that book. وقد كان بعض. So what happened if the books were old and the person was now using new ink? So this is the point he's explaining here. وقد كان بعض الدساسين يغطي ما دسه بخط جديد على كتاب قديم بتتريبه وتعريضه للشمس والهواء. That some of those who would interpolate in this way, yeah, they would camouflage, they would cover what they are interpolating, what they are adding on. Because it's now with a new ink, it's the ink is fresh. على كتاب قديم, and the book is old. So what they would do, بالتتريب, they would put it sand, they would put sand over it. وتعريضه للشمس, leave it out in the sunlight. والهواء, let the wind blow on it, so that it then starts to also become old, and it blends in and it conforms. ليتسق مع لون الخط القديم. It conforms with the color of the old ink. فيسري على الناظر. So it will just pass by a person who looks at it. Because now when a person is reading, for example, now if you're looking on the screen, you are not really inspecting each and every word properly to see, is this word written exactly the same? It just passes by. Like your subconscious mind accepts it and you just go. So like that, the person he will read it and it will just pass by. His mind, his eyes will assume it to be the same, and his mind will simply accept it and he will continue. He won't be literally inspecting and scrutinizing and looking very closely. والقارئ غير النبي العارف بمثله هذا. وكان الجهابذة. So now this here raises a very big concern, isn't it? Would this give possibility of there being fabrications in the ahadith? Would it be possible that you have a very great scholar like Hamad ibn Zayd, for example, and now you have people coming and adding onto his books? So now, and then they're quoting this from him. So now can you say that the muhaddithun would just accept it? Why? Because Shaykh al-Fattah Abu Ghuddah just mentioned فَقَلَّ يُعْرَفْ أَنَّهُ مَدْسُوس. So Shaykh al-Fattah Abu Ghuddah is clarifying and is saying that no, وكان الجهابذة يكشفون هذا التزوير والدس في كتاب الراوي إذا كان ألحقه وأدخله فيه لغاية من الغايات عنده. The experts of hadith, they would easily detect, and they would then reveal this forgery and this interpolation in the books of the narrator if the person added it on, why? For some ulterior motive, لغاية من الغايات عنده, for his personal gain. ويذكرون في ترجمته, and then they would mention it in his tarjuma. Now what used to happen in the past also, they would have this register. And when you do in books of ulum al-hadith, right up until very recently, they would actually have these kind of registers. And in today's times, what now they do is that they take photos with the muhaddith to make sure, like, because I can now quote you a hadith, isn't it? And or maybe I can tell you that I got Sahih al-Bukhari, I got Musnad Ahmad, this is my sanad in it. And I can quote one sheikh who it's possible that I could have met him. And you will just believe it. But now what proof is there? So in the past, they would have registers. Whoever was there in the gathering, they would write down his name. So what people would do is that they would go and they would forge and they would just add the name to that register, because it's very, very difficult. The nafs, it's very difficult on the nafs. And that is why there's so much reward in sitting of gatherings of hadith, because the nafs can't take it, that you have to sit for such a lengthy period. Now, especially if you know you're sitting in a place where like there's hard floor, and there's thousands of people and it's so hot, etc. So it's very difficult to actually sit in that gathering of hadith. So what they would do, they wouldn't sit. They would go around, enjoy their life, and then, but now they want people to assume that they also heard from the sheikh. So they would go and camouflage and write their names in that register. So this is what he's saying. But the muhaddithun were able to detect this, and they would say that لم يكن له سماع لكتاب كذا. He didn't hear this. He doesn't have sanad in that kitab. ولكنه ألحق نفسه في السماع. He went and he added his name there بخط طري, with fresh ink. فكشف أمره وهجر حديثه. Very soon he would be what he done would be made public, and then people would not then go in take hadith from him. وهذه واقعة في الدس وقعت من بعض الناس في بعض كتب الفقه. So he's saying that this also took place here in Kutub he mentions that in the books of fiqh. He mentions in Kashf al-Zunun that it comes with regards to Muqaddama Abu Layth that شرح الشيخ مصلح الدين مصطفى بن زكريا بن التوغمش القرماني وسماه التوضيح وتوفي سنة 809. ذكر الشعراني أنه شرح عظيم. So Alama Sha'rani mentioned that this year it's a huge commentary. So it's a very, very great commentary. It's a huge commentary. And the author, he brought it with him to Egypt. Now, people were jealous of him that he wrote such a beautiful commentary. So they were jealous for him. So what they done? Quietly, secretly, they went and they added content in that book which criticizes Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now imagine if in his book there's content, there's criticism against Ibrahim alayhi salam, what's going to happen? فَأَفْتَوْا بِكُفْرِهِ وَقَتْلِهِ. Then they started to issue fatwa that this person must be killed, and he is a kafir. That how is he speaking against Ibrahim alayhi salam? But he didn't write anything against Ibrahim alayhi salam. There were others who were jealous of him because they found that he wrote such a magnificent commentary. So they were jealous of him. They went and they secretly interpolated and added it into his book. So what he done? فَخَرَجَ هَارِبًا. He just had to flee from that area. So he's giving you an example. So for example, يستقبل الشمس والقمر ولا يستدبرها. When a person is in a bathroom, in a toilet, then he can face the sun and the moon, but he should not show his back to the sun and the moon. Why? And it's written لأن إبراهيم عليه السلام كان يعبدهما. Because Ibrahim عليه السلام, نعوذ بالله, they added this here just so that they could then use it as a case against him. And they could plot against him. So they added this here that because Ibrahim alayhi salam, he used to worship it. وإليك فئة ممن عرف بدس الأخبار في كتب الرواة ودفاترهم. So now he's giving you a few examples who it is known that there were ahadith which were added into their books. So he mentions in Siyar A'lam al-Nubala under the entry of Qais ibn Rabi' al-Asadi al-Kufi al-Ahwal. He's a narrator of Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah, and he passed away in the year 167. So Alama ibn Hibban rahmallah said, قَدْ صَبَرْتُ أَحَادِيث قَيْس. I went through all the ahadith of Qais. I inspected it. وَتَتَبَّعْتُهَا. I analyzed all of his narrations. فَرَأَيْتُهُ صَدُوقًا مَأْمُونًا حِينَ كَانَ شَابًا. I found that he was a reliable person. He was trustworthy when he was still young. فَلَمَّا كَبِرَ سَاءَ حِفْظُهُ. When he became old, then his memory became weak. وَامْتُحِنَ بِإِبْنٍ سُوءٍ. He was tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a very evil son. So his son was not loyal to him. فَكَانَ يُدْخِلُ عَلَيْهِ الْحَدِيثِ. So you remember that he mentions لِقُرْبِهِ أو لِقَرَابَتِهِ مِنْهُ. So he says that it's the son, a very close relative. Now they're living in the same house. So and this person is weak. The son goes and adds on hadith in his books. فَوَقَعَ فِي أَخْبَارِهِ مَنَاكِيرٌ. So therefore, there will be munkar narrations in his ahadith, that his narrations will contradict the narrations of others who are much more reliable. So you can see at the end, even though it was the son who was doing it secretly, the muhaddithun came to know about it, isn't it? And that is how they're mentioning it. Likewise, he says that in Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, under the profile of Kharajat ibn Mus'ab, it's mentioned that Abu Dawud rahimahullah has said that he is weak. كتبه عند غياث بن إبراهيم فأفسدها عليه. One day he was going somewhere, so he left his books in the care of غياث ibn Ibrahim. So the same wadda' that we spoke about, who added on for who wanted to add on for the Khalifa al-Mahdi, he added on the word janah. So he's saying that he left his books with that person. So that guy, what he done is he went and he corrupted his books. He went and he went to go add all his own information and all his fabrications from his side. وجاء في تهذيب التهذيب أيضا في ترجمة محمد بن يوسف الجمال البغدادي. So under the profile of this person, Muhammad ibn Jamal al-Baghdadi, it comes, روى عنه محمد بن الجهم وقال كان عندي متهما. He was a person who was accused. Why قالوا كان له ابن. So again, it was a person who, from his family. يدخل عليه هذه الأحاديث. He would enter all of these narrations in his books. So Ibn Adi mentions هو مما يسرق حديث الناس. He steals the ahadith of other people. وجاء في كتاب المجروحين لابن حبان في ترجمة سفيان بن وكيع بن الجراح كان شيخا فاضلا صدوقا. So until here it shows that he was very great. But now like how the other person had a son who who used to add on. So he had a إلا أنه ابتلي بوراق سوء. He had a very evil scribe. So the person was writing from him. Now imagine if a person doesn't know how to read and write, so they hire someone to write for them. So now that person, he can write anything. This person doesn't know how to read it. So if he whatever that person writes, the person, the employer, the person who is hiring him will accept it. So the scribe of his was very evil. وكان يدخل عليه الحديث. He would add on and write his own ahadith. وكان يثق به فيجيب به فيما يقرأ عليه. So he would trust what the scribe has written, and then فيجيب فيما يقرأ عليه. So this here means that he would acknowledge it when it was read. So the muhaddithun, they would have their books. When students wanted to come and get a hadith from them, then they would give them that book, and then the student would read that, and the muhaddith would accept it. Why? Because it's his book. And then that is how they would get ijazah. So yeah, when these books were read to him and all these additions were placed inside, then he would accept it. He would think that he wrote it. Meantime, he doesn't know that it's his waraq. The scribe just added it in, and now the students are reading it, and he would accept it and he would acknowledge it. وَقِيلَ لَهُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ فِي أَشْيَاءٍ مِنْهَا فَلَمْ يَرْجِعْ. After that, people criticized him for this. It brought it to his attention. but he did not retract. So sometimes when a person points out your mistake, then you don't want to retract it, rather you want to justify it. فَمِنْ أَجَلِ إِصْرَارِهِ عَلَى الْخَطَئِ أُسْتُحَقَّ التَّرْكِ. Because of his persistence upon all of these mistakes, he became deserving of people abandoning and discarding his narrations. So here he just gave you these few examples. وَنَمَاذِجُ ذَلِكَ تَكْثُرُ فِي كُتُبِ الرِّجَالِ وَالضُّعَفَاءِ وَالْمَجْرُوحِينَ. You will find numerous examples like this in the books of narrators and those who are weak narrators and those who have been criticized. So if there are lots of examples, then what does it mean? The muhaddithun, they can only give you an example if they know about it, isn't? They're not going to false accuse someone. They're not going to make accusations. So it shows that the muhaddithun, they were able to detect so many examples like this. This is how they could write it all in their books. So in this way, we cannot for a moment think that it just got passed down, and probably in this manner, fabrications have been marked off as correct narrations. No, the muhaddithun, with their expertise, they were able to see that this here is not from it's not a valid narration. Now another tactic of theirs, al-wad'u ala al-a'imma. They know that if my name comes in the chain, then it's going to be people are not going to accept it. So the one method was they would go and they would add on to the books of others. The other is that they attribute it to great scholars. Now everyone accept that scholar. So for example, if I want to say something, if I mention it on my own, no one is going to accept it. But if I say this great sheikh has said it, now people will rely on the great sheikh and think that that's such a great sheikh, that this here is something which is very great. So he says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَرَّتْ عَادَةُ كَثِيرٍ مِنَ الْوَضَّاعِينَ وَالْكَذَّابِينَ بِأَنْ يَضَعُوا كَلَامًا مَكْذُوبًا. So false statements, أو حديثا مختلقا ينسبونه إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. All these fabricated narrations that they are attributing to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. أو شعرا فيه حكمة وتوجيه, or even some poetry which has some wisdom in it, it gives some direction in life. أو كلمة فيها إرشاد, or a statement which has some guidance with tafsir and gives you some insight. So what they would do, يعظونها على لسان أحد الأئمة الكبار. They would then say, attribute it to one of these great scholars, كالإمام أبي حنيفة, أو الإمام مالك, أو الإمام الشافعي, أو الإمام أحمد بن حنبل. They would say that these great scholars said it. Why? لشهرتهم البالغة, because of their great popularity, ولعظمتهم في النفوس, and because people, it's firmly embedded within their hearts that these are very, very great scholars. ويضعون عليهم. So they would fabricate against them ليقبل ما ينحلونه إليهم من كلام لم يقولوه, so that they could the statements which they are making up could then be accepted. وقد اشتهر بذلك غير واحد من الرواة. So he says more than one narrator has become popular because of this, or notorious rather because of this. كما ابن جعفر النجيرمي Abi Sa'id, and he's also known as Aban ibn Ja'far. So Ibn Hibban rahimahullah said with regards to him, وضع على أبي حنيفة أكثر من 300 hadith. That 300 ahadith he fabricated against Imam Abu Hanifa. He fabricated it and said Imam Abu Hanifa narrated these ahadith. ما حدث بها أبو حنيفة قط. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah never narrated those narrations. So he just falsely attributed it to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. He falsely attributed it to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and then he fabricated ahadith in this way. So here there's two lies. The one is the lie against Imam Abu Hanifa, and then the second is the lie against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وكعبد الله بن محمد بن جعفر أبي القاسم القزويني قال الدارقطني كذاب. He's a very great liar. ألف كتاب سنن الشافعي. He wrote a book which he called سنن الشافعي وفيها نحو 200 حديث لم يحدث بها الشافعي. In this book there are 200 ahadith which Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah has never said. So this should not be confused with the Sunnah al-Shafi'i which we mentioned when you're speaking about Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. Like we said, that there is one which is correctly attributed to him. This is a false one that's attributed to him. وقال الذهبي في سير أعلام النبلاء في ترجمة الإمام أحمد بن حنبل. So under the entry of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal in Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, after mentioning about his letter that he wrote to Ubaydullah ibn Yahya ibn Khaqan with regards to the mas'ala of khalq al-Quran, So he then said that this letter here we will accept it. Why? فَإِسْنَادُهَا كَالشَّمْسِ, that this is so manifest, the sanad of it. فَانْظُرْ إِلَى هَذَا النَّفَسِ النُّورَانِ. So you say, look at this here, you can see it has a spiritual breath. It's so this here is like an acceptable letter. It's not like these letters which are baseless. كَرِسَالَةَ الْإِسْتَخَرِ, like the Risala of Istakhri. And then he says, وَلَا كَالرَّدِّ عَلَى الْجَهْمِيَّةِ. So you remember we spoke about the book Al-Radd ala al-Jahmiyyah, and I told you that the name is different. But nevertheless, Al-Madhabi rahmallah was of the opinion that it's a book which is falsely attributed to Imam Ahmad rahmallah. But as I explained to you, that it's actually, they were very earlier scholars and very senior Hanabila who accepted that Imam Ahmad did write this book. So this is just the opinion of Al-Madhabi rahmallah, but other scholars are of the view that Imam Ahmad actually did write this book, and that's the more correct view. So he's saying that it's not like the book Al-Radd ala al-Jahmiyyah al-Mawdu' ala Abi Abdullah, which is fabricated against Imam Ahmad rahmallah. فإن الرجل كان تقيا ورعا لا يتفوه بمثل ذلك. Because Imam Ahmad rahmallah was so pious, he was so God-fearing, he would not utter such statements. ولعله قاله وكذلك رسالة المسيء في الصلاة باطلة. So Risala al-Musii fi Salah, that's also fabricated, and I explained to you that in detail. وما ثبت عنه أصلا وفرعا ففيه كفاية. So basically falsely attributing something to a pious scholar just because people trust that scholar, people hold that scholar in great esteem. So if they know that that scholar had uttered those statements, then they would accept it. So he says, وغير هذا وذلك وذاك وذلك مما تجده منتشرا في كتب الرجال والضعفاء والمجروحين. Besides that, besides everything else, you'll find so many other examples which are found in the books of Rijal. Now, what's the outcome of all of these fabrications? So he says, لقد كان لحديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أثر بعيد في الحياة الفكرية والاجتماعية الإسلامية. The ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a very great impact upon the thought process in the Islamic society. منذ أن حمله الصحابة في صدورهم, from the time the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum carried it in their hearts, وصاغوا منه, and they became molded through the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ومن القرآن, and by the Quran, وصاغوا منه ومن القرآن أعمالهم وسلوكهم. They molded the actions and their behavior. That means they made all the actions in their behavior, the way they reacted, the way their manners, they made it in conformity with the Sunnah. ثم كان لزاما عليهم أن يسلموا حصيلتهم من هذا الحديث إلى الأجيال التالية لهم. Then it was obligatory upon them, it was necessary for them that they would have to hand over this acquired benefit which they got from the hadith to the next generation. وَقَدْ فَعَلُوهُ, and yes, they did do this. That means they got so much benefit from the hadith, it changed them so much. It really, through the hadith, they rectified their lives. They had such a great impact upon them. So this benefits that they acquired, they needed to pass it on to the next generation. وتولى المحدثون بعد الصحابة هذه المهمة الهامة. The muhaddithun, after the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, they took the responsibility of this great necessity. وَأَخَذُوا عَلَى عَاتِقِهِمْ تَقْدِيمَ السُّنَّةِ إِلَى النَّاسِ. So they took it upon themselves, they put it on their own shoulders, that they will present the sunnah to the people. وَلَمْ تَكُنْ هَذِهِ الْمُهِمَّةُ يَسِيرَةً هَيِّنَةً. This was not no easy task. بل خاض المحدثون في أثنائها غمار حرب فكرية ونفسية ألقى أعداء الإسلام فيها بكل ما يشوش على الإسلام ويدلس على أهله. He's saying that the muhaddithun, they dived into the thick of an intellectual in of an intellectual battle which the enemies of Islam have thrown upon the Muslims, which will cause confusion against Islam, and it will وَيُدَلِّسُ عَلَى أَهْلِهِ, and it will make the people deceived. فقدموا أفكارا غريبة خبيثة متنكرة. So these people, the أعداء الإسلام, they presented a strange and weird thought في هيئة أحاديث يختلفونها, in the form of ahadith which they concocted, وأسانيد يلفقونها, in chains which they made up, ثم حاولوا ترويجها في أوساط العلمية وغيرها. Then they attempted to circulate these in the midst of academia and other circles, حيث خدع بها بعض السطحيين من الرواة. So to such an extent that some of those who only had surface knowledge, some of those narrators who only had surface knowledge, like they weren't, they were below average, they would even become deceived. So you understand that these people, what they would do, they had the enemies of Islam. They had this objective. They want to cause confusion amongst the Muslims, and they want to deceive them. So they presented to them all of these strange views, and in which form they presented it? In a form of a hadith which they made up, and then they wanted to circulate it, and they done it in such a professional manner that those who are not competent enough, they would actually get deluded by it. But the muhaddithun, they stood and they dove into the thick of this war. أما علماء الحديث ونقاده فقد وقفوا لها بالمرصاد. As for the scholars of hadith and the hadith critics, they stood very, very firm in ambush. وصمدوا, so صمدوا also means to stand very firm. أمام سيل الجارف مبينين زيفها, in front of the torrential flood, and they made it known that these are forged narrations. وأسفر صمودهم عن أدق منهج وأحكمه في نقد الروايات وتمحيصها. Their resistance made apparent the most precise methodology and the strongest way that you can ever have to inspect narrators and to scrutinize narrations. والتمييز بين غثها وسمينها, and to differentiate between the accurate and the inaccurate. فأبلوا في ذلك أحسن البلاء. They put to test the best test papers, like they brought forth the best way of testing narrators. وبرزوا في هذا المضمار, and they excelled in this domain. واستحدثوا فيه العلوم وقعدوها. They innovated a new science and they laid down the rules of the science. وضبطوها, they regulated the science. وأصلوها, they put down the principles. وجاءوا بالعجب العجاب في حفظ السنة المطهرة. They came up with the most mind-blowing way of preserving the pristine sunnah. لقد قام المحدثون الجهابذة من أول يوم نبتت فيه الأهواء وشاعت فيه التقولات بواجههم العلم والدين في كشف الأباطيل والموضوعات وتعرية المبطلين والوضاعين وهتك أستارهم وتبيين عوارهم وميزوا للناس الصحيح. The muhaddithun, the experts, from the very first day when this was planted, from the very first day when they planted this, when the enemies of Islam planted this, the seeds of fabricating against the Prophet ﷺ, وشاعت فيه التقولات, and they now start to circulate made up statements. The muhaddithun, they stood up fulfilling their academic and religious responsibility in exposing these baseless fabrications, and in revealing those who were doing this here, those who were fabricating, وَهَتْكِ أَسْتَارِهِمْ, and removing the veils from them, وَتَبْيِينِ عُوَارِهِمْ, and making apparent their faults. So if you look in the footnotes, they got here about Abu al-Qasim Abdullah ibn Muhammad ibn Ja'far, that is saying that they would actually publicly disgrace them. So he's mentioning with regards to him that كان يفهم الحديث ويحفظ, he would get good understanding and good memorizing ability. You know, the mind works in different ways. Some people, they can memorize very quickly, but it takes long to understand. Yeah, he excelled in both. He would understand the hadith also, and he would memorize it also. ويملي, and then he would dictate a hadith. Lots of people would frequent his majalis, but towards the end of his life, he now started to make a mix-up, and he started to fabricate a hadith on mutun which were very well known. So he came up with new asanid for a very well-known mutun, and he added on to famous books. فَافْتَضَحَ or you can even pronounce it as فَافْتُضِحَ, whichever way, that he became disgraced. وَحُرِّقَتِ الْكُتُبْ فِي وَجْهِ, right in his face, all his books were burnt. وَسَقَطَ عِنْدَ النَّاسِ, people lost all respect for him. وَتُرِكَ مَجْلِسُهُ, his majalis were now left vacant. فَلَمْ يَكُنْ يَجِيءُ إِلَيْهِ كَبِيرُ أَحَدٍ, no one would now come to listen from him. So you can see public disgrace for a person who wanted to fabricate against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَمَيَّزُ لِلنَّاسِ الصَّحِيحَ مِنَ الْمَوْضُوعِ, they distinguish for people sahih narrations from fabricated narrations. وَالثَّابِتْ مِنَ الْمَدْسُوس, and established narrations from those narrations which are interpolated. فَكَانُوا حِصْنًا مَنِيعًا فِي حِفْظِ السُّنَّةِ الْمُطَهَّرَةِ, they were like this very strong force, this very strong fort in preserving the pristine and the pure sunnah. So you know a fort, how it protects the inhabitants of that fort. If you went to any of these ancient cities, then you would see what a great system they had in building their forts to protect the inhabitants. So the muhaddithun, they were like this. Yeah, they had the sophisticated fort in preserving the sunnah. من أن يتمكن منها المغيرون والمفسدون, that those who want to attack it and those who want to corrupt it, that they must get any leeway of doing it. وَالْحَاقِدُونَ, and those who hate it. وَالْمُشَعْوِضُونَ, musha'widun is, you know, the person who plays tricks. So the swindlers, that the swindlers must be able to get any leeway of doing anything with the sunnah. They had the strong fort that they would not give any leeway. There would be no possibility for them to do anything. So he says, وَقِيلَ لِعَبْدِ اللَّهِ ibn al-Mubarak كَمَا تَقَدَّمَ, it was said to Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, like how we already mentioned it on page 104, في شأن التخوف على السنة من صنيع هؤلاء الدساسين والكذابين, that people now had, they were fearful that you have so many people are trying to add on and interpolate, and they are fabricating against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So with fear, a person told him, هذه الأحاديث الموضوعة, that we have so many fabricated ahadith, what's going to happen? Are these going to be passed off as words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Very calmly, Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahmallah, he responded and said, no, ta'ishula hal jahabidha, that the experts, they will love and they will expose it and they will reveal and they will make it known that these are not the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember that they have divine assistance. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. So he says, وَصَدَقَ اللَّهُ الْعَظِيمُ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most great, has spoken the truth. فَقَدْ أَقَامَ سُبْحَانَهُ فِي سلف هذه الأمة المحمدية من الصحابة والتابعين ومن بعدهم محدثين أوتادا. أوتاد, you know, it comes in the Quran, isn't? والجبال أوتادا, so like pigs. The mountain, you see it on top, but it's the pigs of this earth. So the muhaddithun, they were like that, they were pigs. You had this hurricane of fabrications which came. You had this great storm of fabrications, but the muhaddithun, they were like pigs. They stood very, very firm. وَحُفَّاظًا نُقَّادًا, and they were huffaz, and they would not hesitate in speaking against those and criticizing those who fabricated. أَمَدَّهُمْ بِبَسْطَةٍ فِي الْعِلْمِ وَالْحِفْظِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assisted them with vastness in knowledge and in memorizing. So in the footnotes, point which I want to make, which is not related directly to this topic. So if you look on the 6th line of the footnotes, okay, so on the first line you can see it's a statement of Sheikh Sulaiman al-Nadwi. He's speaking, one of the senior ulama of India. On the 6th line, وَمِن طَبِيعَةِ الْبَشَرِ أَنَّهُمْ إِذَا أَكْثَرُ اسْتِعْمَالَ قُوَّةٍ مِّن قُوَّاهُمْ تَزْدَادُ هَذِهِ الْقُوَّةُ قُوَّةً وَحَوِيَّةً. So as a tangent here, so, although it is related to the topic, but I want to mention it in a way that it's not related to the topic, that it's the very nature of human beings that when they use any of the anything of the body, then it increases in strength. So like that, if a person has to use their mind and they use their memory, then the memory will improve. So people, so many times, almost every student asks us, how can you improve the memory? How can we improve memory? So the best way, Imam Bukhari rahmallah has mentioned it so long ago when they asked him, they thought that he has some secret medicine that he's taking to have that kind of memory. He said, no, that you just have to continuously memorizing. And those of you, when you're starting to memorize the Quran, you notice that you started with 3 lines sabaq, and by the time you completed, probably you were taking over quarter para sabaq. So like that, because you're memorizing so often, so you are strengthening. So the mind is like a muscle. You know, when you start to do push-ups, if you haven't ever exercised, today you'll do maybe 2 push-ups, but if you continuously do it, a time will come when you'll be able to do 20, and then 30, and then 40. So the more you utilize the faculty, the more strength it gets. So in the same way, the way of strengthening the memory is by continuously memorizing. So he's saying that أمدهم بمسطة في العلم والحفظ, basically speaking about how in the remaining portion of the footnote of how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum etc. they had so great memories. وأنعم عليهم بسيلان الظهر, they had their minds would just flow. وسعة الاطلاع, and they had a very good overall knowledge. والصبر على التحصيل واستمرار الدأب فيه, and they had this patience in attaining knowledge and in continuously training for it. So I want to complete until the next page, because then it's the end of this chapter. So please bear with me. It might take about 3-4 minutes, inshallah. وتحمل الألاقي في تلقي السنة وضبطها. They would bear and tolerate. So you also make تحمل الألاقي with these 5 extra minutes. وتحمل الألاقي في تلقي السنة, in gaining and obtaining the sunnah, and in preserving it, and in writing it, and in gathering it. فكانوا آية تصدق آية. They were like literally one sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is proving the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا ذِكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ وَأَسَّسُوا لِكَشْفِ الْوَضْعِ وَالْوَضَّاعِينَ رَكَائِزَ ثَابِتَةً مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. They established these strong pillars of knowledge, قائمة على منهج نقدي علمي سديد. These pillars and this support is based on correct academic inspections. يمكن كل عالم ومتعلم من معرفة الحديث الصحيح من الموضوع. That they set up such a strategy, and they made up such a system where now it becomes so simple for any scholar, and leave alone a scholar, even a student will be able to differentiate a sahih narration from a fabrication, and he will be able to describe a liar from that person who is speaking the truth, and even that person who is speaking correctly compared to that imam or that thiqa narrator who is making a mistake. وَالضَّابِطُ مِنَ الْمُهْمِلِ, and a student also using the strategy which these scholars made up in going according to their principles. Even a student will know how to differentiate between that narrator who correctly preserved the narration compared to one who was negligent. وَخَدَمُ السُنَّةَ الشَّرِيفَةَ خِدْمَةً لَمْ يُخْدَمْ بِهَا عِلْمٌ مِنَ الْعُلُومِ. So they served the sunnah in such a way that no other science, whether it's a religious science or whether it's even a secular science or whether it's any other science, no science at all has been served in this way, to such an extent that it was said, there's different ways of explaining the statement. I'll just explain it in one way, and maybe if you read the footnotes, you'll understand the other way as well, and if you go through other books, you'll understand the different way. So this is the one way that I'm explaining it. Al-ulum salata, that there are 3 types of ulum. علم نضج ومحترق. So here you're translating according to this one method, that it's ripe, it's ready for cooking, but it has not been cooked. So something when it's ready for cooking, that it's on there, all you have to do is now put it on the pot and put it on the stove. But so you got it right up until that point, but now you don't cook it. So he gives the example of this here is Nahwa and Usul al-Fiqh, that it was ready, it came right up until this point where it could become, it's like ripe, it's ready for cooking, but then it was not cooked. So this is the one. Then it's the second type of knowledge is Ma nadija wala ihtaraqa. It just went stale like that. It didn't even become ready for cooking, and neither was it cooked. So وهو علم البيان والتفسير. This here it's balagha and tafsir. وعلم النضج واحترق. Then you have that which became ripe. It's now the perfect time to be cooked, and then it was cooked. وهو علم الحديث, and it is علم الحديث. So now he's explaining the meaning of this here. والمراد بالنضج والاحتراق. Here when he's saying that it became ripe and then it was burnt. The literal meaning of ihtiraq, to be burnt, and one explanation of it is cooked. So he's saying that the muhaddithun, jazahumullahu kulla khair, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recompense them with every good. وَضَعُوا كُتُبًا فِي تَرَاجِمِ الرِّجَالِ. They wrote these books on the entries and the profiles and the life of narrators. الثقات والضعفاء والمجروحين, all types of narrators, whether they are reliable, whether they are weak. وفي ضبط أسمائهم وأنسابهم وبلدانهم, how to pronounce their names, how to their lineage, their cities where they came from. وما افترق منها وما اتفق. When two narrators have the same names, but they are different people, when or their names and their father's names are the same. وحصروا من روى عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من الصحابة والكرام. They counted exactly who narrated from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and they mentioned every Sahabi who quoted from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. وبين الراوي الثقة العدل من سيء الحفظ والمجروح. They explained that Rawi was reliable, and they differentiated him from that narrator who had a weak memory. So they went into so much detail. وفاسد الرواية من صحيحة, the one who when he's quoting he quotes in a corrupt manner compared to one who quotes accurately. وحصروا رواية كل راو, they then wrote down the narrators of each and every narrator. وأحصوا شيوخه والآخرين عنه. They wrote down all his teachers' names. Then they wrote down all his students' names. والبلدان التي دخلها. Complete history they done. They were like better than the FBI, so to say. I hope any of you is not the FBI agent here. So they say that والبلدان التي دخلها. They wrote down everything, even the cities where this person went to. That, you know, I always say that we know the narrators better than we know our own family and better than we know our own neighbors. You ask me, my neighbor, what's his grandfather's name? I don't know. But ask us about a muhaddith in Sahih al-Bukhari in the Muwatta. We'll be able to go, his father, grandfather, great-grandfather, we'll be able to tell you everywhere where he went to. Ask me where the person who lives down the street, when he was born, I don't know. But ask me about the narrator from Sahih Muslim, I'll tell you exactly. This scholar said this year, this scholar said that he was born in this year, this scholar said he was born in this year. So much information. We know them better than we know our own family members. That ask a person that, do you know where your cousin, how many countries he has visited? They'll say they don't know. This narrator, you know, in this year you went here, in that year you went there, this is the year you performed Hajj, everything they wrote. That is why Shaykh Abd Abu Ghuddah is saying that even the students know all of this here. والبلان والأحاديث التي رواها, all the narrations that he narrated. واستوفوا كل شاردة وواردة. So this is to the minute detail في شأن نقلة الحديث, to the minute detail, every possible information about those who transmitted the hadith, حتى أربوا على الغاية, until they reached to perfection, so to say. ومن هذا قالوا في علم الحديث إنه علم نضج واحترق. That is why it is said that it has been ripened well and it has been cooked, and now it becomes a delicacy that you taste it. That is such a scrumptious meal. So delve into the science of hadith. Sorry for going over time. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.